Hi, in this video I wanted to give you my thoughts on the film emulation software Dehancer. Can it give you character and atmosphere in your images? Let's dig into it. So welcome back to the channel. I'm Simon, a professional photographer and also photography enthusiast working in the south of England, and I do interior shots for people and also my own work in intentional camera movement and loads of other things as well, really. I should say that Dehancer actually reached out to me and asked me whether I wanted to review the software in return for a license of the software, but they didn't ask me to say anything in particular, and they don't need to see this video before I publish it. So what I really want to do is give you my own honest thoughts about the software, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. Although I might look like I come from the film era, I actually really got into photography through digital cameras. So I'm not really an expert in film and the different sorts of film and what exactly they look like. So in reviewing this software, I won't be analysing whether they are authentic emulations of different software. But what I do really love is the search for character and atmosphere in my photography. And so I want to look at this software with that sort of view in mind, so that is it a creative tool that I can work with and add that character and atmosphere to my images? And one of the reasons I've got into Fujifilm cameras was their film sims and the sort of desire to add something more than just taking a picture that represents exactly what I see. And also I've bought several preset packs from various people for Lightroom and for Capture One to try and add this sort of character and vintagey style or filmic sort of style, not really knowing whether it's completely authentic or not, and not really worrying about it. I just want to take a picture, edit it, input some artistic viewpoint, and then put the picture out there or use it for whatever means that I wanted to. I'd heard of Dehancer through video work, and I knew they had plugins for DaVinci Resolve and all the video editors, and people thought they were highly regarded and all of that sort of thing. But I wasn't aware that they had a plugin for photo editing. So I was really excited to try this and see what it can do, as I said. But I don't have the knowledge to know whether it's a completely faithful emulation of different film stocks. So if that's what you want out of this video, maybe you should go and look at some of the other videos about Dehancer that go into much more detail and do direct comparisons of actual film and the result from Dehancer. But Dehancer have a great website. It's really lots of information about how they've arrived at the software they've got and their sort of methodology of what each control does, and it's very much based in the actual analog process of developing the photos that I don't know that much about, as I say. So it's quite interesting getting a software where you have lots of controls that they are similar to things in Capture One and Lightroom, but they're obviously derived, and the algorithms behind them are from a very much an analog point of view. So you do end up getting a different result. In many ways, different software always leads you to have a different result. And I think sometimes we get very stuck in one, I need to edit in Lightroom, or I need to edit in Capture One. And sometimes I think there are benefits of not being that sort of pinned down and thinking, oh, Capture One's great at that, and Lightroom's great at that, and Luminar Neo is great at that, and Dehancer is great at this. And with all of those, you keep your enthusiasm. You feel like you're seeing things for the first time, and you're not just doing the same old stuff, which is great for creating your own aesthetic, I guess. But I'm always one who wants to explore, and so I like the challenge of using a different software and getting different results. So it's really interesting to try these different things. I think now we'll go into the computer, and I've got an image that I was going to run through and edit in various ways and show you what the controls do, and then show you some images that I have edited with Dehancer, and show you what it can do. Here we are in Capture One, and the recommendations from Dehancer are that you take a raw file and you optimize your exposure and white balance until you have a really nice basic image like the one I have in front of me. This is a photo shoot I did with my great friend and musician. He's an ambient musician called Bob Holroyd. I'll put a link to his website down below, and you can go and listen to his music if you're into ambient electronic music. So I was going to take this shot into Dehancer and show you a bit about the process involved. So in Capture One, we go and we say edit with, and then we have the Dehancer Lightroom plugin, bizarrely. So Dehancer recommend editing in a 16-bit TIFF with an sRGB color space. So that's what I've done, and I click on here, and that should bring us into the Dehancer interface. So on the left-hand side, we have presets that Dehancer have designed, and you can also make your own presets, and you can just choose one of those, and that should take you to a great rendition of Agfa Color 100 in this case. And you can go on to make adjustments if you so wish down the right hand side based on the presets that they've offered. I mean, there's some really nice looking edits that you can create very quickly from the presets that are given. Just give you a quick zoom down some of these, and you can see there's a huge variation. Some of these lighter ones, more vivid ones, are ones that I've created for specific images, so maybe they're a bit loud and leery and not in keeping with the subtle nuances of various film stocks, but there we go. Even weird Lomochrome purple, crazy. Anyway, so those are, as I say, sort of one-stop shops to getting film emulations that have been designed by Dehancer. With the film profiles, you've got the option to add a film profile to your initial raw file before you've done any editing. So if I go to these, you can see the various changing of the colors and the various tones of the image, almost like color grading before you have color graded in a way, before you've edited. So I found my favorite way of editing in Dehancer is not to assign a film profile at the beginning, but to go and run some edits and then apply a film profile towards the end. So I've got this edit that I've pre-done, and I'll go through each section and show you what I did and try and give you a bit of an overview so that this video doesn't get too long if I don't want to go into too much detail. But there's loads of information available on the Dehancer website. It gives you background into all of the technicalities of each fader and each setting and why they've made them like that, and a lot about the background of film development and how it creates the images it creates. The top section here is just to readjust your image if you still found you needed to compensate for exposure one way or another and the white balance and cancel out some fringing. Then if I click on the next section down, this is the film developer, and this is basically emulating the process of taking the film and putting it in the developer and the variations that you can create in the actual concentration and the temperature of the various chemicals. So you have a contrast boost control where you can add or subtract contrast, and then gamma correction, it affects the midtones, and then you have two color controls which are quite interesting. This one affects the most vibrant or most saturated colors, and this one's more of an overall color control. So moving down to film compression, this is designed to emulate the fact that in negative film, clipping in the highlights occurs much later, so there's much more latitude. So it effectively brings down the highlights in my image here, but it flattens them out as well. So it's not a completely just a linear control, and there are obviously controls to fine tune this and fine tune how much of the image is affected by the film compression, and also again a color density which either accentuates the most saturated or slightly desaturates the most saturated parts of the image. But that's a really nice control to bring back highlights and give the image more of a film type look. And then the expand section, if you've lost too much contrast via doing your film compression, you can add a bit of contrast back in. So similarly to controls in Capture One or Lightroom, the black point and white point do enhance the contrast. And with this control set to normal, if I increase the contrast, I effectively increase the saturation a little bit. Or if I went to Luma, it only increases the tonal contrast and not the saturation. And in some instances, that might be really useful. Then we have the next stage of the process, which is the process of actually printing your image out onto paper. And in this section, you have the option to simulate that onto several different papers, of which they all react slightly differently. I have settings in here that are slewing the image in a certain way, slightly maybe too much contrast here and maybe a bit too much exposure. But yeah, similarly, tonal contrast and color density similar to the other places. So increases the saturation of the most vibrant parts of the image. And if the saturation gets a little too much from adding all of that in, then you can rein that in a little bit if you wish. And then the analog range limiter, as it says in the name, limits the image and softens it a little in the extreme highlights and darkest areas. So these various papers do affect the image quite differently. So there's so many different areas that you can play around with this. They seem to give really pleasing results, and the way that the highlights and the shadows seem to work and the various tones seem to blend together is really nice. And then there's an area where you can add some color grading or color correction if you want. So if we go in here, I don't think I've added anything, but you can push the image towards the blues and away from the yellows if you found that there was too much yellow in your image, or in this image it's quite red. So if I didn't like that so much, I could push my reds away from red and go, maybe there's too much yellow in it as well. And you can see with very small changes, you get some nice subtle differences, although I'm quite enjoying this very warm, very rich image that I'm getting. And then there's various controls here that you can change tones in the shadows, mids and highs. Then this next section is one of the main ones that seems to really bring the world of analog to your images, and that's obviously film grain. And film grain, as explained by Dehancer, and they've got a really good video on YouTube explaining this. The film is made up of little grains of silver halide that react to the light. So you can effectively think of a film image as loads of grain all dumped onto a page effectively. And in Dehancer, that's how they've done it. They've worked on an algorithm that recreates your image sort of with grain, instead of just taking your image and slapping a picture of grain on top. So if I turn on this edit that I've done for this particular image, you can see you can affect the size and you can add more grain in the shadows, which is quite interesting because it actually almost acts as a gentle lifting of the shadows, and then in the highlights it almost acts as a gentle reduction of the highlights, which is quite an interesting concept. But if you do look at the grain in detail, it seems to really be a beautiful way that it changes with the various tonal levels and even colors of the image, and it seems quite different to the grain in something like Capture One that I use. And I've really fallen for the way that it looks and the texture that it gives the image. It really makes it feel like a photograph as opposed to an image, if that makes sense. So yes, there's several controls here to play with that, and I will leave you to look into those details. And if I go down to the next section, which is halation, this is quite an interesting one, which gives a red-orange glow around the areas that are changing light. So around the back of Bob's jacket here, you get these orange sort of halos, which is reminiscent of cinema cameras. And yeah, I've played with it, and sometimes it seems to work in an image, and due to its red nature can actually add a little warmth. But I tended to not be a massive fan for me in my own photography, preferring the next section down, which is bloom, which I do like, which I've used other things in other software such as glow and even negative clarity to get a bit of a softening and a vibey sort of glow about an image. Or I've also used mist filters, but then with a mist filter you've got one amount of this sort of glow or bloom, but with this you can wind it back. This impact slider obviously takes down the amount you're adding, or you can add more and get a more vibey, glowy image, and it doesn't soften the image or anything. It's really nice the way it works. So that's a really cool way of adding that bloom to an image without having to put a mist filter on. And then I haven't really looked into the film damage very much. It just adds, as it would suggest, scratches and dust and stuff, which is not my bag for my photographic workflow. And overscan gives you this view as a part of the film roll, which is not for me either. And then the last control that I've been interested in is the vignette, which is, as it says, just a vignette. Although one thing I have noticed is the feather comes into the middle quite a lot. So if you crank the feather up fully, the whole image seems to darken. So I've been quite wary of that and pushing the feather not too far, and then pushing the size quite big as well, and getting a nice vignette. So I've ended up with this really nice edit. So we've taken it from that to that, added some really nice contrast and really lovely textural grain and everything. And then the last part of the puzzle would be to add in the film profile. And I looked up and down and tried a load of film profiles, and I've gone for Cinestill 800T, which I found quite nice. And then I've fiddled around with the push and pull. Each film stock you can push and pull by 2 stops EV and get different results from that. And that's based on the actual behavior of film stock as you expose them to more light during the exposure process. So some of them react quite differently to what you expect. So that's worth having a try with all of those. So my final edit is, quite different to how we started, and it has a really beautiful richness to it and a texture to it, as I said. So then the end of the process in here would be either to save that preset down if you like what you've done. So I could come in here and click here and then put Simon on the end, and I don't want to rewrite that, and I'll add that preset to my list. And then I'll be able to come back to this edit if I wanted to apply it to any other images. Because one of the things about this is you can't batch edit a series of images. So if you wanted to do a similar edit to lots of images, it would be well worth saving a preset. And then when I've finished, I would click OK, and that takes me back to Capture One. So that was the edit I just did. So really nice. And I was going to show you a few more edits that I'd done with Dehancer. Well, it is a bit of an enhancer really in my world. And again here you can see the really nice textural. It just, I don't know, there's something about the way it renders the grain and everything. So this is an edit I did in Capture One, putting grain on and everything. And then the next image is the image from Dehancer, and that thing about how the grain is rendered, it's definitely visible here. I know it's not exactly the same edit, it's difficult to do that, but it very much looks like the grain is just on everything in this image. And then on this image, it doesn't look like that. It all looks like a part of the image. It's exactly as Dehancer say they've designed it. Here's an image edited in Lightroom, and here's a Dehancer version, and really like the way it's softened these highlights, probably with the film compression and everything. And then this beautiful area here where you can see the grain is really lovely in my opinion. And again here, really nice texture to it. That's from Capture One, and this is from Dehancer with that glow or that bloom that I quite like. And then one final image from this set, which I really liked. It's just such a vibrant, yet not, it's sort of not overblown, but it's got real depth of colour to it that I really like. Here's another image that I really enjoyed doing, which is a black and white image of my grandson. And I just love, again, the softness, but I don't know, it's just got an energy about it. He's obviously got an energy about him, but the glow and the vibrance of this image is really nice. And finally, I was trying to do a new profile shot for YouTube, which is now my profile shot. And I took this image and edited it in Capture One and added grain and everything, and then did a version in Dehancer and just loved the one in Dehancer better. And again, looking at this, it's just so much, I don't know, different. It's like a homogeneous part of the image, and I really, really like that, and it just gives it a wonderful texture. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed that sort of little walkthrough of how it works and got something from that. But I'll try and sum up now what my feelings of Dehancer are. So apart from having a quiet word with my continuity manager about the fact that I'm wearing something completely different and it's a different day than the first part of the video, the important question is, what are my thoughts about Dehancer? In the way that I do these videos, my emotional connection with the things I use is very important to me. So the kit I use, the cameras, and all of the things that I use in my photography have to seemingly make some sort of connection with me. And I felt really connected to Dehancer. When I was editing, I felt engaged with the software and involved in the whole process, and the various aspects to it led me to be excited by the results as well. I found myself going through an edit and actually sitting back and saying, wow, that looks really cool, and it's something different that I haven't experienced using other software. And this is the important thing. If it inspires you to push forward and create something different and go in a different area and explore some other aspects that you might not have explored before, then I think that's a really key thing about using any part of the whole gamut of equipment, lenses through to software and even computers and screens, and you know, I've talked about controllers and things that I use. All of these aspects I think are really important to create that engaged process and make you feel like you want to get up in the morning, go out and shoot and edit and create some amazing work. And Dehancer definitely helped me with that. I mean, it's not for every image and every project. Clearly, it's for those that you feel you want to add this atmosphere and this analog feel to, and not necessarily my work with interiors where that wouldn't be the case unless a client wanted a specifically stylized sort of shot. But it will definitely stay as part of my arsenal of software that I use on my photography. So as well as having the Lightroom plugin that I've been using for photo editing, Dehancer have their video editing plugin that works with DaVinci Resolve and Final Cut Pro and Adobe Premiere, which can add similar effects to video footage. And they also have an iOS app that can be used out and about on your photography. Unfortunately, I can't try that because I haven't got any iOS devices. They do have another option, which is Dehancer Online, which is accessed through a browser, and it gives you a range of editing functions similar to the desktop software in not quite as much detail, but there are quite a few preset options that you can use, actual presets and preset settings of contrast and lightness and various color settings, which makes it quite fun to use for your phone if you haven't got the iOS app. And if you go to their website, you can try the software for free for a number of days. And also they've given me a code that if you put in the code SIME Photography, you can get 10% off if you actually think that this is something that you want to purchase. And that will help me also, because I get a small commission from that. So that would be great if you use that code. I mean, it helps everybody. So I hope you found this look at Dehancer interesting and informative, and maybe helps you answer some questions about the software and see whether it's something that could enhance your workflow with your photography. And if you've enjoyed this video, please subscribe and click the like button, as that helps the channel and helps me make more of these videos. And if you want to see more videos about software and the way I use it and my workflow and the various ways I edit, drop a comment below and I'll see what I can do, and hopefully I'll see you again here soon.